If Shakespeare were writing Macbeth today, Lady Macbeth probably won't be a queen. She would be a psychologist because before she changes Macbeth, she understands him. Not after weeks of conversation, not after watching him closely, but after reading just one letter. Was Lady Macbeth really the ruthless villain generations have imagined, or was she simply the first person to recognize the ambition already hidden inside Macbeth? Hello, I'm Smita, and welcome to Between the Lines. Together, we'll uncover the ideas, techniques, and hidden meanings that make great literature timeless. Let's begin. Lady Macbeth has become one of Shakespeare's most controversial characters. She's often described as evil, manipulative, power hungry, even monstrous. But Shakespeare presents someone far more complex. Before Lady Macbeth persuades Macbeth, she studies him. She reads his thoughts, his fears, his desires, and his weaknesses. Perhaps her greatest weapon isn't manipulation, it's perception. When Lady Macbeth first appears, she's completely alone. The first thing we see her do is read a letter from Macbeth. He excitedly tells her about the witches, their prophecies, and the extraordinary possibility that he may one day become king. He ends by calling her my dearest partner of greatness. Look at Shakespeare's choice of words. Not wife, not beloved, but partner. For a Jacobean audience, this was unusual. Macbeth doesn't merely share information, he shares ambition. From the very beginning, their marriage is built not simply on affection, but on shared aspiration. As soon as she finishes the letter, Lady Macbeth reaches a startling conclusion. Yet do I fear thy nature. It's too full of the milk of human kindness. This is one of Shakespeare's richest metaphors. Milk represents nurture, compassion, gentleness, humanity. Lady Macbeth doesn't doubt Macbeth's ambition. She doubts his ability to silence his conscience. Notice how accurately she diagnoses him. Macbeth wants greatness, but he also wants to remain honorable. Already, Lady Macbeth understands him better than he understands himself. She continues, thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. This is extraordinary. She recognizes two opposing forces inside Macbeth, his ambition and his morality. She believes they cannot coexist. To become king, she thinks he must first overcome his humanity. Whether Shakespeare agrees is another matter entirely. Lady Macbeth then says, hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear. Observe, she doesn't threaten Macbeth, she doesn't command him, she intends to persuade him. Words will become her greatest weapon. This prepares us perfectly for the psychological battle of Act 1, Scene 7. Then comes one of Shakespeare's most famous speeches. Come, you spirits, unsex me here. This line is often misunderstood. Lady Macbeth isn't asking to become a man, she's asking to be stripped of everything society associates with femininity: mercy, compassion, tenderness. She believes these qualities will prevent her from carrying out what lies ahead. But notice something fascinating. She asks for them to be removed, which means she knows they already exist within her. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, she further says. Here, look at the irony. Lady Macbeth is terrified, not of murder, but of remorse. She fears guilt before the crime has even happened. She isn't naturally heartless. She's preparing herself to become someone she isn't. Shakespeare quietly reminds us that conscience is far more difficult to silence than Lady Macbeth believes. Then, perhaps the most disturbing image follows. Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall. Once again, Shakespeare contrasts nurture with poison. Milk, which sustains life, is replaced by gall, which represents bitterness, corruption, and moral decay. Lady Macbeth believes kindness must be exchanged for cruelty. Yet Shakespeare never grants her request completely. By the end of the play, her humanity returns with devastating force. Here's the tragedy. Lady Macbeth believes humanity is something that can simply be switched off. She believes conscience is a weakness, but Shakespeare proves exactly the opposite. The very emotions she tries to suppress become the source of her destruction. The sleepwalking scene doesn't begin with madness, it begins here. So, the golden takeaway, Lady Macbeth's greatest strength isn't manipulation, it's perception. She recognizes Macbeth's ambition, his hesitation, and the battle between conscience and desire. But she makes one fatal mistake. She believes humanity stands in the way of greatness. Shakespeare suggests it's the very thing that makes greatness possible. So I'll leave you pondering over this. When Lady Macbeth says Macbeth is too full of the milk of human kindness, is she exposing his greatest weakness or identifying the very quality that could have saved him? Perhaps Shakespeare's tragedy begins not when Macbeth meets the witches, but when someone convinces him that compassion is something to be overcome. In our next episode, we will discover that on Macbeth's return home, Shakespeare gives us one of the greatest scenes of persuasion ever written, a conversation that changes the course of Scottish history. Until then, keep looking, keep questioning, keep reading between the lines. I'm Smita. Thank you for joining me.